Okay, the time is 5:00 p.m. and call to order. A Bastrop EDC board reserves the right to convene into executive session at any time during the meeting regarding any agenda item in compliance with the Texas Opens Meeting Act, Chapter 551, Government Code. First of all, any public comments? No? And I'd like to apologize in advance. I am going to need to jump out early, so we are going to jump into executive session first. It shouldn't take us that long, but I wanted to go ahead and I have a flight to catch, so we have some business we need to attend to. So, going on to 4.1. The Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. 1, Section 551.071, consultation with the attorney, update regarding BEDC's contract with the Bastrop Fine Arts Guild, temporary office staffing needs. And number 2, Section 551.074, personnel matters, executive director position, temporary office staffing needs, and the time is 5:04. The time is 5:21. The Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will reconvene into open session to discuss, consider, and/or take any action necessary related to the executive sessions noted herein. Item 3.1. Approval of meeting minutes of the Bastrop EDC regular board meeting of April 16, 2018, and the special meeting of May 8, 2018.
I move to approve minutes as written.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries. Item 3.2, acceptance of the Bastrop EDC's financial summary report for a period ending April 30th, 2018. Thanks for joining us. And
All right. I did volunteer to come and present it since I prepare it. I figured it would be easier anyway. So these are the financials for April 30th. And this is just a summary of revenue and expenditures. Right now, the EDC is a positive $198,000 revenue to expense. Sales tax is 88.5% of your revenue, so we always want to kind of analyze and keep an eye on sales tax. We are positive. It's been fairly strong. We budgeted flat this year, kind of with an unknown. We did not end last year strong, so we felt like that was conservative. So we are about 4% above what we've forecasted at this point. This is just a forecasted expenditure to actual, and we are 7% above the forecast. And I have kept an eye on, Sean laid out the forecast, so we've just been following that. This does not include capital. Here's where we identify where we are on our capital projects, the budget against the actual. Right now, it's pretty much just engineering costs for the MLK infrastructure and the Agnes infrastructure. And this is the debt. It does not include any of the bond that we're discussing tonight. I'll add that next month. If y'all have any questions for me.
Make a motion to accept the April financials.
I'll second that motion.
all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Tracy. Item 3.3, consider all matters incident and related to the issuance and sales of Bastrop Economic Development Corporation Sales Tax Revenue Bonds Series 2018, including the adoption Resolution R 2018-0004, authorizing the issuance of such bonds. Jason Hughes with Hilltop Securities here. So Jason, turn it over to you.
All right, Chairman, Board, good evening. Good to be with you. You have before you a short summary of the sale that we undertook. And so what I'll do, if you'll turn immediately behind the cover page before we start getting into the tabs, put in here a one-page summary. And just as you may recall, what the plan was is sell the bonds via a competitive private placement process. And so that's what we did. The nice thing about that, again, is one, we were able to more quickly sell the bonds. We were able to avoid some cost of issuance that we otherwise would have paid. And we also didn't have to fund a debt service reserve fund. So on top of that, we also got very good rates. And as you can see there under that summary of bids, we did receive 5 bids, with the lowest bid being from Amegy Bank. And the nice thing about that is, as you can see there, the rate was 3.39, so a little over 0.2% lower than the closest one. But they also, as you see on the right-hand side, give you a call feature where you can call those bonds anytime. So let's say you get excess revenues in or sales taxes really start flowing, you can always take those and pay these bonds off at your choosing at any time without any kind of prepayment. And as you can see, or without any penalty. And as you can see there, the next 2 closest, First Internet and BB&T, they were actually going to make you hold those or hold those for, and not call them, I should say, for a period of 7 years. So again, lowest rate, most flexibility, so win-win on both sides. What we're asking for your approval tonight is $1,250,000 worth of bonds, and so that includes the cost of issuance in there. Once you net those out, that'll produce the full $1.2 million to the EDC. So it is, as we talked about at your meeting last month, a 15-year term. I think that was very helpful, again, just getting those 5 bidders in. Again, those banks typically like a little bit shorter paper than 20 years, and so I think that helped. As a comparison to debt service, I went back and looked at what I presented at your February board meeting whenever we first started talking about this, and you can see there between what was presented to the board then versus the actual debt service, and about a little over $55,000 different, and on an annual basis, about $3,700 saved with that bid. If you'll turn with me behind tab A, this includes just a set of the numbers. You had there at first, the first page there, the sources and uses. And so you can see, again, $1,250,000 worth of bonds, uses of funds, cost of issuance is $48,000. We have the deposit to the project construction fund of $1.2 million, and then that rounding amount of $2,000, that's just because we sell bonds in $5,000 increments. The next couple of pages go through the debt service, and the next 2 pages show the debt service on a semi-annual basis. So as you can see there, February 15th, 2019 is when the first payment will occur, and then we'll start principal payment August 15th, 2019. And if you'll turn to the very last page behind tab A, this just shows on a fiscal year-end basis just what I went through. And as you can see there, what we average, roughly that $108,000 to $109,000 on the right-hand side. Again, at the 3.39%. One thing I would point out too, which I didn't mention, that 3.39% is a fixed rate. So you approve this, we close it, rates go up by 1%, this rate stays the same. So it's not subject to any kind of adjustment. The last item I have in the sale book is behind tab B. As part of that competitive private placement, what we did is we put out a term sheet. And so we sent this to a number of banks, including local banks as well. And it essentially gave those banks the parameters in which they could submit a bid. So we actually received bids on this past Thursday. So that's when those 5 bids came in. That gave us time to put together all of the legal documents. Kristen Savant with Norton Rose Fulbright, the board's bond counsel, is here. And so again, that was just something that those banks were able to use as a guide whenever they were submitting their bid. The one thing I would, if I could, is give a big thank you to Tracy and Angela. They went through and we had a number of questions that came from those banks as far as just the security, the debt structure, things of that nature. One of the things, because these are sales tax revenue bonds, you as a board can't directly control the revenue that you bring in, much like a city can by adjusting the tax rate. So there's a lot more due diligence put into sales tax revenue bonds in general. And one of the things I always worry about, it's not uncommon to have those banks that will come through, will ask a lot of questions, and at the end of the day, for whatever reason, can't get comfortable. Amegy Bank, from talking with the placement agent, asked the most questions and then submitted the winning bid. So again, Tracy and Angela, I certainly appreciate. They were a big help, very responsive, and again, led to us getting the interest rate that we did. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I'd be happy to go into more detail on anything you may have, but I would recommend approval.
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
If we had to go out for bonds, another set of bonds in a year, are there any implications or anything in this contract that would prevent us from just going out and doing a bond?
There's nothing that prevents you from doing that. You do have a covenant for additional bonds test, just like you did in 2006. That is 1.25 times average annual debt service being covered by gross sales tax. So you have a lot of room there, so depending on how big of a bond you wanted. But no, there's nothing in here that if you approve this is going to prevent you from debt financing at a later date.
Move that we approve Resolution R 2018-0004.
A second?
Any opposed? Carries.
Thank you so much.
Job well done.
Thank you.
Tracy, Angela, thank you. Item 3.4, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding Resolution R 2018-0005 of the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation to allocate $50,000 to FY 2018 beautification projects. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for allowing me to come back. Last month, we made a presentation about the beautification program that the City of Bastrop and the Main Street program are working on this summer. As you guys are aware, we were not able to retailer the business incentive grant program this year. I do want to point out that the 2017 business incentive grant program, under the program objectives, that it wishes to maintain and improve the quality of life for its citizens, attract outside spending, generate additional jobs, and increase sales tax by fostering an economically viable commercial district. The objective of this program is to provide assistance to those groups who are attempting to improve the appearance of the downtown district. So I know it's a little bit different than what was originally intended, but we believe that the beautification that we're working on will ultimately lead to increased foot traffic, broader tourism and economic development appeal, hopefully improve recruitment and retention rates, business and property owner pride and motivation, as well as greater involvement from our community members when we launch our Bastrop Blooms program next year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have. I'm not the financial wizard, so Tracy Waldron is here if you have any specific questions pertaining to the funding.
Are you guys pretty much ready to go with your project?
We are ready to go. Steve Ballard, who works in the hospitality and downtown department at the convention center, has been doing all of the research. Our Main Street Design Committee met last week and reviewed some of the bench designs and trash can designs. And so once we get the okay on the funding, we will follow all of the city's proper bid procedures. And depending on how many vendors are selected, we will go out for both informal and formal bids and get those items placed, hopefully before the end of the summer. The planter boxes that are being designed by the high school, they did not get to those this year, but we will actually buy all of the materials this summer from the instructor, and they will start those when they go back to school in August, which works out better. I've been told we can't plant flowers in the heat of the summer anyway, so we are going to have to wait to plant those. But other than that, we should be ready to go.
All right.
My next question is, do you believe that you'll be able to
Do you believe that you'll be able to finish the project in the 2018, or is this going to have any carryover for 2019?
So downtown beautification is never done. So we've got an outline that we went over. So the things that we identified in our hit list as far as the additional benches, the additional trash cans, the smokers outposts, the additional wayfinding signage, and the planter boxes we aim to get done this year. Yes, sir. And then we'll have new ideas for next year that we'll work on internally.
Well, part of on the question that he asked, you know, it has to end by the 1st of October.
Absolutely.
So what we're paying for, will you be able to finish by that time?
Absolutely,
Okay,
yes.
Just because I want to make sure we qualify. the same
Yes,
as we
this
did everybody
funding
else.
is, yes.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion.
Tracy?
I would like to clarify the bucket that this is coming out of. We are not reallocating the grant funds. There is $83,000 already set aside in EDC's budget for city projects. That's where we're asking the money to be taken out of.
Thank you.
Is that where it normally comes out of, when we do that grant program?
No.
No? Okay.
Another
But
quick-
EDC had already created a fund that was already approved by the EDC board for city projects. We're really just bringing this resolution to ask that this be a project that funding be used for. So we're not moving any of the budget around, we're just using those funds that are already there.
So the 50,000 that's in that, our normal won't be used at all this year? Okay.
Just to maybe give a little history on that, a couple years back, we were funding the grant out of the city projects. And just to clarify that, we decided to split those separately, just to keep them totally separate from each other. So that's why this is coming out of the city projects, and the grant bucket remains. And then at which point, if we decide to fund that for next fiscal, that would be the board at the time to decide if we want to continue that program or not.
Sarah, last month when we had the comment section, there was a gentleman that said he had another plan.
Yes, sir.
Did he come forward with that?
Richard Smarzek, he sent me a copy of it, and we have talked several times. I've asked him if he is interested in presenting that to the Main Street Advisory Board for feedback. And in our discussions, he doesn't have any intention for that to be something that would launch this fiscal year. It would be a program that we would incorporate in our discussions when a new economic development director gets on board, and we look at retooling the program if this board chooses to fund it in future fiscal years.
Excuse me, 3.4.
I move that we approve the resolution R-2018-005 to allocate the $50,000.
I second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 3.5, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding updates from Tracy Bratton with Bowman Consulting on BEDC projects, Agnes Street Extension, MLK Technology Drive Extension, Business Park Detention Pond, and the Downtown Trail Expansion Project. Welcome, Tracy.
Good evening. Podium feels awful close up here. Maybe it's my eyes. Need some bifocals. Okay, I'm going to try and take these one at a time. There's a couple of separate items, 3.6, 3.7, so there's some details I'll leave out, and we'll get to them in those specific items. The Agnes Street extension, the design plans are about 90% complete at this point. I've been performing coordination between Seaton's design team and the design team from the seller, because there are drainage and easements that intersect and cross Agnes. I did meet with Jerry Palladay, the city's interim engineer, to review those plans approximately 2 weeks ago. And he has a draft in his hands to review. We have bidding discussion on that project we'll save for the next agenda item. MLK Technology Drive Extension Project, we completed additional survey required. It was authorized the board in the last session, and I anticipate having that complete and turned into the city for a city review and approval before the next BEDC board meeting. And the detention pond project is all integrated with that. That's one plan set at this point. And when we get those plans turned in, I'll also set up a follow-up meeting with Bastrop County. We've met with them 3 times already, but we'll meet with them again to show them what plans look like, where everything's headed. There will need to be a temporary construction easement coordinated between the EDC and or the city and Bastrop County in order to actually enter their property and construct that detention pond. And that's something I'll coordinate with EDC staff in the city and the county when we meet next. The downtown trail expansion project, I again met with Jerry Palladay to bring him up to speed on that project. There were a few things related to the grants that have happened that Wesley Brandon was going to coordinate with TxDOT to get that added to the interlocal agreement between the city and TxDOT. Those things didn't get done before Wesley left. I discussed them with Jerry when I met with him, and Trey Job has reached out to me asking for what they are, and so helping try and assist that or facilitate that process for them to get that interlocal agreement updated to follow and incorporate all the grant requirements. So those are the update on those three projects. I have exhibits. If anybody has any particular questions, or we need to point at anything, but I'll just open up for questions before we go on to the other items.
Just one small question. While the $6,000 is not a huge amount, I'm just curious as why the TxDOT environmental permitting was not considered as part of the scope, or why it was not included, because you guys are obviously been doing this for quite a long time.
Right, that's actually in item 3.7, 2 agenda items down, but we did not, based upon our initial conversations with Willie, and I can't remember his.
I'm just stop you a second. I think, do we have to wait for that agenda item before we discuss that? That's okay.
Yes. Well, item 3.4 is, or 3.5 is not a voting item. It's just a consideration and discussion item. So if you want to go ahead and have 3.7 discussed with that.
That's okay.
You can do that.
I just want to make sure we're okay. Okay,
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we scoped that project, when we prepared the preliminary schematic for it and initial budgets, we had met with Willie, the area engineer here in the Bastrop office, and had discussed that with him, and he viewed it like a maintenance project and was not anticipating asking for TxDOT's environmental process. The grant requirements specifically require that you follow TxDOT's environmental process to comply with those funds. And so that's why we hadn't anticipated it initially, and what's required now.
Yeah, so my understanding is, to help run out, is we're going after a grant to get them to give us money for the project so we won't have to pay as much. And so to get that grant, we're required to get we're spending $6 to get
one of the grants is a couple $100,000, and the other one's like the Keep Bastrop Beautiful was like $100. It's paying for half, if not more, of the project. The grants are so. And there could be more hoops to jump through. I don't have the bigger grant, the actual grant document yet to review it, but yeah, it's very much a positive trade-off in terms of compliance versus the amount of the grant.
And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that when we did the full scope, we weren't banking on the grant funding to begin with, correct? Okay.
Yeah, it was 100% BEDC funded at the time, and at this point we are anticipating it being actually 2019 money based upon
timing of everything. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments for Tracy regarding discussion? We're on 3.5. We're just discussing it at the moment.
He's discussing all of them.
That's what I clarified, which we could.
Okay. That's fine. I just want to make sure we're full.
So we'll go on to item 3.6. Yes. Consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding authorization to Bowman Consulting to begin accepting bids and qualifications regarding the BEDC's Agnes Street Extension Project, and to provide said bids and qualifications to the BEDC for future consideration, discussion, and possible action.
Okay. Like I mentioned a minute ago, we anticipate having the plans for the Agnes extension complete and ready to bid very soon. A couple coordination items going back and forth, and I need Jerry's review to be complete. in discussions with BDC's counsel and Sean before his departure, we discussed delivery methods for procuring the construction. The BDC is not required to follow public bid advertisement requirements. And on this project, because of a couple of items. One, there is a delivery timeline and a performance requirement in the BDC's contract with Seton to have this road open in a certain amount of time, or primarily that requirement. What I'm going to recommend to the board is that we solicit bids from 4 contractors that are operating currently in the Bastrop area, are large enough to take on this project, have the applicable experience. So they basically be like qualified bids from 4 bidders in sealed competitive bids, but not publicly advertised for general contractors to bid on. And the reasons for that is we know at that point we won't have the conflict between an apparent low bidder that may not be qualified to do the scope and the scale of the project. We're obtaining bids from contractors, that many of which are currently doing projects within 1 mile of this project. So wanted to, and discussed it with council beforehand, make sure the board was okay with that. That will also allow me to begin to issue draft plan sets to the contractors so they can begin talking to subs and getting prices together now, rather than waiting for having a complete bid set, publishing notice in the paper, then having to have a pre-bid meeting with them and waiting multiple weeks for sealed bids back.
Yes, I agree with what he said about the procurement process, and that the process is what we establish it for this type of situation. My only recommendation, advice, and request would be on those procurement, their request for their qualifications that you're going to be receiving from them. Have them attach with that a copy of their proposed contract with us as well, please.
Yes, we'll. I'm working on a contract template to provide to the EDC so that we get the same contract term language for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, we would need a.
So I move to approve to allow Bowen to go ahead and start that process.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion passes. And one more. You're not going to cut you loose just yet.
Quite yet.
Yeah. 3.7, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding Resolution R 2018-0006, approving a change order with Bowman Consulting for the downtown trail expansion project for environmental permitting required by TxDOT to comply with the grant funding requirements not part of the original scope of work for the project in the amount of $6,000. And this is what we just discussed.
Yes, this is the item we just discussed. It's environmental requirements imposed as part of the grant funds.
I move to approve Resolution R 2018-0006.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This may have been a record. The time is 5:40. I'm sorry, I'm used to saying 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah. The time is 5:49, and we are adjourned. As far as yeah, there was no action. There was no action taken. Thank you. My apologies. Thank you.